Welcome to Drinks with a VC, where we explore the humanity behind investments. Grab your favorite drink and join us as we laugh, learn, and liquor up with some of our favorite venture capitalists.
Whether you're a startup founder, fellow VC, LP, or just curious about the investor ecosystem, you've found the right podcast. Please like and subscribe.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Drinks with a VC. Thanks for joining us via whichever platform you're using to view or listen in. I'm Vik founder and general partner of Green Cow Venture Capital. And as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-hostess with the mostest, Bree Hansen from Ravix. Hey, Bree.
Welcome, y'all.
Very exciting. Today's episode is brought to us by Fidelity for startups. Fidelity is committed to supporting the university accelerator and incubator community. Companies can automate their equity management operations and financings in a single collaborative hub, using the automated cap table and data room to prepare for their next round of financing. No matter where these companies are on their journey, Fidelity has the expertise to support them. To learn more about how Fidelity can help your company grow, please check out the episode description below. Bree, we've got a new sponsor and we've unveiled a new website. How fun is that?
It's amazing. It's very exciting. And we've got a lot of really cool things happening in 2024.
Yeah. All I can say, it's definitely wonderful to be back in 2024 and recording episodes rather than planning and designing and blah, 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 blah. I just want to also point this out. It's sentimental for me, but we started doing this in 2020 during the pandemic. And at first it was just something fun to do to keep us all sane and connected. And to see it kind of grow into this is really fantastic. And then 2 weeks ago, we were able to celebrate 4 years of doing this in person in New York City with our significant others.
It was a blast. It was also Vic's birthday. So happy belated birthday to Vic.
Thank you.
And we were able to go see a Broadway show and we were able to go see some jazz. We had so much fun. The only thing that I lost was my glove.
Yeah.
Two pairs.
One glove, one sad glove is missing. Please do visit us at w.drinkswithavc.com. So it's DWAVC.com. You can access all of our episodes, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll also be releasing new content. Lots and lots of exciting stuff. Speaking of all this excitement, I'm very excited to have our next guest on. He has really very quickly become one of my favorite people in St. Louis. He's incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, and just an easygoing human. You know, Bree, one of those people that you can be around and just instantly you're just like, this is nice. It's chill. There's not like this crazy intensity about him. And so anyway, I can't wait to dig in. Should I go ahead with the bio?
Absolutely. And I too have been really looking forward to this because you have been speaking a lot about your new friends in St. Louis. So I'm just as excited as you are.
Yeah, fantastic. Listen, our next guest was born in Australia, a globetrotter from his wee days and through his formative youth. He received a BS in mechanical engineering from Yale, his MBA from WashU's Olin Business School, and a master's from WashU in advanced renewable technologies. He's thrived as a field engineer where he's consulted for international energy companies, including Bechtel, Brightburn, Oxy, and General Electric. He's also helped to design proton-to-proton fusion generators. We should probably ask him about that. He's thrived in finance at Morgan Stanley, Lewis and Clark Ventures, even took a role as director of finance and ops at Invisibly. In 2014, he founded Ascend Venture Capital, where he specializes in new marketplaces, programmatic decision-making processes, and science that pushes the boundary between fiction and reality. Some of his portfolio companies include Applied Biosciences, Arbol, Astrapi, Boat Planet, Caste, Crew, Oxio, Sojourn, and Utopia. This guest is multidimensional and is just as likely to be found geeking out with a founder as he is training for a triathlon. Please welcome the pride of Pinecrest School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Dan Connor. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, guys. Thank you for that
Hello.
wonderful intro. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We are excited to have you. It's been a long time coming. First questions first. What are you drinking today?
I'm set up with a Sazerac, so the New Orleans type cocktail that's a rye that has some fight going down and a little bit of simple and absinthe.
Do you have a story behind why you chose that as your drink?
Oh, it's extensive research. Yeah, evidence-based research. In business school, always. Well, I guess I lost my way in business school. That's the short answer. The pressure to drink Manhattans and old fashions was surmounting because of Mad Men, and that never really sat right with me for some reason. And so I started this journey to find what drink was right for me, and went from gin and tonics to scotches, and tried to find the interim, and discovered Sazeracs. And I do make it difficult on the bartenders usually because, as my wife will tell you, as soon as I order a Sazerac, the next thing I say is, I like it extremely dry, so less than half of the usual sweetness level. And I say that every time, so much that she could recite it. And sometimes I get a lot of weird looks when I say I like it dry. Like, how am I going to make that dry? The wine thing. A lot of times you tell someone you want a Sazerac and you get a weird conglomeration of different things. And it's not right.
Dan, we'll jump right into it. Two things about your answers to our question pre-podcast stood out to me. The first is the fact that you were born in Melbourne, Australia, and then you grew up all around South Asia. So Brunei, Singapore, India, and then you find yourself in Fort Lauderdale. The second thing that stood out was that the person that you admire the most, and this is true of several of our guests, was your father, for his unflinching honesty and for being the most capable leader. And so, look, in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop. Yeah, that's right. He says something. He says, "Who's your daddy and what does he do?" I think Bree and I are both wondering, who is this man and how did you have the lifestyle that you had and travel the way that you did?
Yes. Where do I start? So Dad was in the Peace Corps to begin with, and he was born in St. Louis. Joining the Peace Corps brought him to some places he'd never even dreamed of going, and that sort of started this path of wanting to see the world. And so he started in Nepal, and from there, when he finally got a job with Citi back then, he got the job in New York, and his first training post was in Manila, which is kind of wild for a white guy from Missouri. And then from there, it was Japan, where my sister joined the team, and then Australia and Brunei and onward. And we spent about 6 years in each place. And his job was setting up regional branches. Citi, many banks were launching their international operations, and they were launching in emerging markets. And so that's why we were in each of the places that we went to, crossing paths with some very fascinating folks, including the Sultan of Brunei and his many cousins. And part of the reason I said my dad is probably the most unattainable capability as a leader is because he was at the helm of a regional bank in Singapore, OCBC, during the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. That bank was actually voted a year later as the world's most safe bank. So think about that in the context of today. Many banks are bent out beyond their ski tips right now. Yeah. And it's caused a lot of risk, and that's causing a lot of anxiety about the actual sector right now. And in that kind of environment where banks started falling and failing, that his bank was voted the most safe in the world. And so that kind of statement isn't lost on me. And I just, I don't think I could ever know fully how he did it. I could tell you some of the key takeaways I had growing up, but yeah, those are some of the insights I had about how good he is at what he does.
Yeah. Did you grow up speaking a lot of different languages? Was it a multilingual household, or was it English only, or?
Yeah, we were English speaking, and most of the countries that we went to were English speaking predominantly. The That's not to say that the prevailing religion was Christianity or anything that's like the demographics in St. Louis or a place like St. Louis. Brunei is a predominantly Muslim country. Even the amusement parks there would stop multiple times a day for prayer. All the rides would shut down and all the music would go off. Every night you would hear the call to prayer. And so I didn't actually pick up many languages permanently. I've gotten pretty good to a professional degree in my life with Bahasa, Portuguese, and Spanish. I'm trying to learn Korean now because I've always wanted to, but the way that I was taught languages was as soon as you land in a country that doesn't speak English predominantly, that you scramble as fast as you can not to be discovered as a foreigner for as long as possible in any conversation. And once you reach the point where you could deceive people into thinking that you're from that country, then you reach the level of proficiency that you want. And then once you leave that country, you forget that language fairly quickly. So yeah, I've lost a lot of my Portuguese and Spanish. The funny thing about languages is that they're just in there marinating. And once you hit the ground, then you can pick them up fairly quickly. Korean, I am Korean by heritage, so I've always wanted to learn it. I didn't when I was growing up. And so I'm trying to pick it up now. It's quite difficult. It's challenging.
Yeah. It's so funny, Bree. I think when most kids talk about a life always traveling, when you see it in movies, it's always the kid lamenting, I didn't have friends for that long and I would constantly switch it up and woo is me. But I feel like for whatever reason, your mentality, your parents' mentality was, no, we're going to assimilate, we're going to blend in as quickly as possible and enjoy the culture. Is that safe to say exists?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't. It's always been part of my personality not to want to be discovered as not from that place. So maybe that came from that kind of upbringing. But I love travel, and I think it was certainly instilled in us to enjoy and dive into the culture of any place that you go. For example, when I was growing up and we were in these far off countries, we would always go out to dinner every so often, and we wouldn't go to fancy places. My dad has this thing that he wants to go where the locals go. And so we would go to these open air wooden stool places with metal trays and have the most outstanding meals imaginable, vegetarian banana leaf style places in Singapore and Brunei that just blow your mind in terms of the flavors that you would find. I just never learned the names of all the things on your plate, but just fantastic. And I don't even think that I'm that adventurous with food. And I think I've just been exposed to such a wide swath of cuisines that even with how picky I am, I still enjoy a wide array of things. A person like my wife, who hasn't been exposed to that many different cuisines and is still that adventurous, even more adventurous than I am, is something that I respect as well. That's the parable you could attach to it. I've been to all these places and I've enjoyed them all. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the most adventurous person out there. I have massive respect for people who discover that sense of adventure, even from upbringings in one city.
Yeah. Hold on though, because one of your favorite meals is crispy pata. I think number one, we have to describe to our audience what crispy pata is. Then we need to ask Bree if she would eat it. And then later on down the road, we have to go to a crispy pata spot and
yeah, let's do it. There's a place in St. Louis that has it apparently. Yeah, so it's a Filipino dish and it's deadly. You take a pig knuckle and you boil it and then you bake it and then you deep fry it. And that's not a horrible way to treat any kind of thing that you're going to eat, but it comes out fantasy. The skin turns into pork rinds and the fat turns into the consistency of cotton candy, and the meat is just cooked to tender perfection. But it's got a half inch to an inch of fat on it. You really only want to eat it once a year. And I always request that somebody would make it on my birthday among my family. And they've almost burned their house down multiple times trying to do it. And so I'm not allowed to request it anymore, but it's missing from my life. And I love crispy pata.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Now we know what to get Dan for his birthday. Crispy pata.
Old Billy, find some
yeah.
crispy pata.
Well, there is a spot in St. Louis. I was doing some research. As soon as he listed it there, I was kind of doing some research, and there's 1 or 2 spots actually that sell crispy pata.
Yeah.
So we're going, and Bree, when you come to visit us, we're all 3 of us are going, and we're eating crispy pata.
Would you eat it, Bree?
Absolutely.
You would?
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'll eat anything once.
I feel like that's true about you. I don't know why I
Yeah.
question you on that front. You're
You
pretty.
know that.
Yeah, you're pretty.
I'm curious.
Yeah. Wait, Bree, what's the most adventurous thing that you feel like you've eaten in your life?
Maybe a rattlesnake.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, I don't think I would ever, I don't think I would ever go for rattlesnake. And I've done ostrich steaks and alligator and things like that. Some weird things in the places I've been. But
I would not do spider. I couldn't do I have problems with spiders generally. I could do insects like crickets, etc. I'm good with. I've done live octopus in Seoul. So I feel like I'm ready to go with crispy pata. It just seems like it's the perfect fatty bite for
live
oh
octopus.
yeah.
Live octopus it's a little funky.
That sounds disconcerting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. It's like swimming around in my stomach. Ooh, that was like the worst.
Yeah.
No.
So getting back to Dan, when your family then went from South Asia to then Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
I gotta pause for 1 second.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry, this damn motion sensor started.
The motion sensor.
Yeah.
We'll take it all out. So getting back to Dan, and your family's kind of cross globe experiences, you land in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Were you excited about being in Florida, or were you just wait, Florida after all of this? And then sort of what was your experience like when you was it harder to assimilate and to blend in, or was it easier to assimilate and blend in?
No, those are 2 excellent questions. So Florida was fantastic. It was a very easy place to live. And I was in boarding school, so we had a very long leash. It's warm and it's there's beach nearby, and that independence always appealed to me. So, it was fantastic. I look back on Fort Lauderdale in such positive light. In fact, in my opinion, there's no place that matches it in your ability to just jump on a boat and go off and try and hurt yourself on a wakeboard or something. The intercoastal waters extend into so many neighborhoods that the chances are that with a few friends, somebody has a boat, and so you can. In places like Chicago or San Francisco, to go get on your boat, you got to finish a heavy breakfast and then jump in the car, call the marina and say, okay, I'm coming to get my boat. And then off you go. You forgot the key to the marina gate, and you got to go back and then, load up the bags onto the boat, and then off you go. But in Fort Lauderdale, to get on your boat, it's to finish your coffee and walk out to the backyard and jump on your boat, and off you go. So that was, it was a fantastic place. I learned a lot of really great and dangerous things there too, like during hurricanes. But so in fact, your second question is very apt, because it was kind of difficult to assimilate. And so this sort of the undertone of having seen a lot of different cultures and have these wild experiences floating down the Ganges, bumping into dead bodies and things like that. They're just like, when you tell people about that, they just kind of look at you like, you can't be serious. That sounds insane. And you kind of end a lot of conversations like that, but that would be true of everywhere, really.
Yeah.
And then, but being visibly foreign in a lot of places is a limiting factor to your ability to assimilate. In Fort Lauderdale, in my American school, I was made fun of for being Asian. And in fact, when I was in American school in Singapore, I was made fun of for being white. So I'm never going to win anywhere. People see you for what you are, and they just make that assumption. So, but that's not to say that I didn't thrive. I had multiple lifelong friends. I just visited for a wedding last weekend, and I was successful in sports and all kinds of things. So I had a great time.
So you played tennis, is that right?
Oh, I played tennis growing up, but I never was competitive. I grew up playing tennis because my mom was very good at tennis. She was country champion or runner-up multiple years in
Wow.
Brunei and Singapore. So she was unstoppable at tennis, and so she taught me the game,
Yeah.
and when I was growing up, like I could not beat my mom, and it turned out to be later in life, she was pushing 55, 60, and I still could not beat my mom. My mom basically taught me how to lose at tennis. But I picked up swimming along the way, and I swam in high school and college. And then I discovered water polo and never looked back. It is fairly common.
Would you
Wow.
say that sports was one of the things that helped you assimilate when you were moving around, or what were some of the tips and tricks you would have in order to meet new people?
Yeah, meeting new people to me is a matter of just getting out there, taking sports classes, yoga classes, just getting out there, putting in the work to just be in awkward places and meeting people. But yeah, swimming sort of gives you a natural community, gives you a chance to travel around a little bit and see different places. But it's not the popular group of people in high school for sure. I was never like a popular kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started playing water polo later in your
Yeah, I
career,
started
like
playing water polo in college.
in college. What
Wow.
made you go to Yale in the first place? What made you say, okay, I'm going to go to Hartford, Connecticut, and
Yeah, I was
freeze
recruited
my
for
ass off?
swimming. So that was the only school I applied to.
Wow.
And yeah, eventually everybody gets sick of staring at the black line on the bottom of the pool. And even Michael Phelps at some point got sick of it. If you do that early enough, you discover water polo, and there's another life out there.
Yeah. So I have many aspiring water polo nieces and nephews in my family. What is the quick, before we go off on too much of a tangent, what's a quick word of advice for young players just starting out?
Yeah, every time you're in practice, just warming up, passing around, you got to switch hands every time. It doesn't matter how bad it is to start with. Eventually, 5, 6 years of doing that, and you've got so much work on your offhand that you'll just be dangerously ambidextrous. That's something I was coached in my guys, and it works.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. What the heck made you go from seeing your dad be this amazing leader in banking, financial institution, and to engineering? What made you gravitate to engineering?
Yeah, the desire to be not anything like my dad early on was the main reason. I always enjoyed math and I always enjoyed physics, but I never wanted to do math or physics in college.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any sort of middle ground except for mechanical engineering. And it was a great education. I learned a lot about the way that things work in the world, and it enabled me to be a field engineer early on, which they call systems engineering now. Back then, there wasn't really a name for that. And then when I went back to grad school to do more energy engineering grad work and an MBA, I started discovering very quickly that I was made for finance. And as much as I resist in my finance classes, I was like, damn it. And it's way easier than engineering. So,
So you turned to finance pretty quickly after that, but you were just learning about your past in field engineer. I can't even pronounce half the things that you did or helped to design. You decided to pivot and go in that direction of finance. Do you ever at any point in time kind of wish you were back in that world?
no, never. No, I started to realize just looking at the people around me, the career folks in engineering, and I just realized I'm not like one of these people. I can't recite Navier-Stokes equation just off the top of my head 20 years into my career. I can't give you the equations for shear and wind forces. And other people could. The cooling forces of wind across a wind of a certain temperature across a blade of a certain temperature. Like there are people out there who just have that stuff on the tip of their tongue. And I just realized I never was going to be one of those people.
Yeah.
And the second thing was that I wanted to have a say in the allocation of resources and effort toward projects that or people that are getting things right. And in engineering, you can't really do that early on. You can maybe after 30 years of engineering, you can ascend to be a manager. But until that point, you're really just stuck on projects. You can't really make any decisions about what projects those are or what companies to work with. And I learned that in finance, you can do that fairly early on. They give folks with a high school education the keys to the portfolio kingdoms. The only way that you can continue to do that is if you're good at it.
Bree and I were assessing your life choices, and I think one thing that we always came back to, and you alluded to a very tiny bit at the very beginning of this discussion around why St. Louis. Why did you decide to go get your MBA from Olin? We all know WashU is a fantastic school. I love WashU. For all the listeners out there, I'm an investor in residence at Scandalaria Centers, and I think they're doing fantastic things there. But coming out of Yale and trying yourself, why'd you decide on St. Louis?
Yeah, so my family is originally from here. My whole family. My dad was born in St. Louis. My uncles, my wife's family, everybody's here. And so I guess we're kind of like sea turtles. We leave and go other places and then come back to have a family. So that's kind of what everybody did. We all descended on St. Louis. And once we started to have children, that support system is so important. And so that's why we continue to be here.
Yeah. You mentioned the word quantamental a couple of times, and it's a fascinating word. I think first, let's start by defining what quantamental means. And then what I'd like to do is really better understand how you utilize your engineering background and that mindset along with this quantamental sort of fancy buzzword that we're going to define now. To inform the way that you invest in at Ascend.
Yeah, so the engineering background to me gives you an ability to parse things out into their functional components. And then, you kind of use the superposition principle to figure out the direction of the entire system. Quantamental is a conglomeration of quantitative and fundamental. And in finance, you choose to be one or the other. There are certification exams to get a charter on either path. But in fact, I think that it's like the public and private sector. You need to be steeped in both in order to know how to do either well. And that's the approach that I took to finance and my foray into venture capital is you can, with enough ability to look at all of the pieces and figure out the parameters that are pushing things in different magnitudes and come up with a conclusion of where the system is heading, then you can actually do quite well in things like venture capital. I think that it would mean different things in other spaces. In a space like consulting, you would find yourself trying to quantify social behaviors and organizational behaviors. But in finance, in venture capital, it means quantifying the soft skills of entrepreneurs and figuring out the ultimate path, the inevitable point of an industry, and finding the company that's occupying that point before anybody else. That's the approach that I took personally to it. But I'd love to hear how you individually did as well.
Yeah, it's funny. When I look back on my time in venture and how I formulated my thesis and how I've chosen to invest then in portfolio companies, at the end of the day, I think you're right. It's like this synthesis or synergy between these soft skills marked with how a founder can execute or has executed over time, combined with then market timing and finding those green spaces to occupy before anyone else has occupied them. I always struggle. It's always funny. I feel like I got my MBA from experience, and I've never gotten a formal MBA. And so for me, it's always fascinating to see things line up and things that you were just talking about, how they line up within my investment thesis. It gives me a whole new way of articulating what's going on in my head at a very fundamental level, which is always, it's nice to hear, but it's also confirming that I'm taking a similar approach, just not articulated this.
Yeah, I've always found a lot of alignment in how we think about venture, you and me, for
Yeah.
sure. Bree, how about you?
Oh, well, since I'm not a venture capitalist, I haven't had to go through that process. But if I ever move into venture, I guess I'll have to think of which lane I choose, or if I can combine them into one lane. You both can, apparently. You don't like to be boxed into one or the other.
You know what's so to our audience and to all of our guests that have been on here, I don't think it ever occurs to anyone that Bree is not an investor. And I think that is a supreme compliment to Bree because interestingly enough, and I've seen this, and Bree, this isn't just me blowing smoke. People have heard me talk about you behind your back. You weren't in the room, but I think she has fundamentally just such a high EQ. And because she plays so much in this world of pre-seed and seed stage startups, things are harder to quantify. There aren't a lot of traction metrics that you can rely on that you do in later stage growth, equity, and investing. I think she's really developed this one side of her brain very strongly, where she's very intuitive about founders, their abilities, how they socialize with other founders, if they take criticism well. These are all things that Dan, you and I take in as data points that Bree just does automatically. And we talk a little bit about this. It's like, I think you can develop this investor brain without having to put your money where your mouth is at any point. I don't know, Bree, do you disagree with me?
I think I
No, but it's
recognize
kind
that,
of tough because for me personally, it's yes, I do have, I love personality tests and and that pre-seed seed, pick a founder that you think is going to be really great. But it's so hard because I've seen great founders fail. So it's, I don't know, quantifying it using metrics. Now that I'm in the CFO world and I sell CFO services, I've had to learn way more metrics than I never wanted to know what EBITDA was, but now I know what it is and had to completely design a plan around, the rule of 40. So I guess I don't know. I think I have to, now that I'm like saying it all out loud, it has to be a combination and it's never going to be one combination. It's going to be a little bit from here and a little bit from here, and you're just going to have to do your best.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. We had a gentleman on that was probably one of my favorite guests of all time. And Dan was famous for having a very large library.
Oh, right? Yes.
Dan Rubin. And
it was in the Wall Street Journal, by the way.
It was in the Wall Street Journal. A write-up on his personal home library. This is going to sound like a very weird transition.
Isn't it? It is a dream.
It is a dream. And it's a beautiful, you see this article and you see the pictures. And I think that's one thing I wanted to do. If I've ever been compelled to just be in the room with an investor who's at that point with Dan and just be like, hey, can I go to your library and just see it? I don't consider myself a very well-read human being. I've read books, obviously, but I almost gravitate more to articles and these other things. I get very self-conscious around people that are very well-read. But you are a well-read human. I think you would say that you're pretty well-read.
Me? I think, the only reason I wouldn't say that is because in college, I encountered some people who are like NBA level read. In the athletic world, you're surrounded by people who you match up with in the pecking order, and then there's a whole new level of championship of the best people at that ability, and then there's a whole different level of people who are the champions of that Champions League, and that's the sort of professional level. And I encountered people like that in college and could never scratch that surface. So I don't think those people would call me well-read at all.
Those guys are freaks.
But I tried. For an engineer, I think I've a lot of non-engineering stuff things. I've been on a long stretch of business books lately. I did go through a sci-fi phase. I went through postmodern phase, Japanese supernatural things, and other wanderings. I think I've read enough to be dangerous.
You mentioned one book that I think is interesting. I have not read it. I definitely had ChatGPT summarize it for me at some point in time. But Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, which For our audience, he was also the author behind Sapiens. The book discusses how the focus of human endeavor shifts from surviving and overcoming things like disease, and misery, and all the themes that are largely addressed in Sapiens, and says, okay, there are new objectives for humanity, such as achieving happiness, immortality, and divine-like powers. You said that that was a favorite book of yours. I'm interested in knowing very specifically, what are you the most excited about from that book? And then what scares you shitless about our society right now, and some harbingers that Yuval might key in on?
Oh, great question. I love that. Yes. So the first part of your characterization of Homo Deus is bang on for Sapiens. That book is more about the arc of how we went from struggling to survive to thriving and eliminating disease and war. Harari would be, and in fact has been written up recently about saying this current manifestation of warring countries has been an aberration in the longer arc of history. Homo Deus is more about the transition, the long arc of who we trust with our decisions. And that's how I would characterize my understanding of that book. So we started off as trusting all of our decisions to deities. Our leaders were ordained by God. Our choices in life were ordained by God. Our paths in life were chosen by God. And we've, over the long arc of humanity, we've moved toward current status, which is trusting ourselves, our feelings with those decisions, right? How do we feel about starting a family? How do we feel about this leader?
Yeah.
How do we feel about where we live, or what job we go into? And the longer trend of that kind of turns back on itself, and we eventually come to trust algorithms as new deities, right? Because they know us better than ourselves. And so I think that we're still on arc for that. In the future, I think that we will be trusting those very decisions to what the data say. And I think that the seeds are already planted for that outcome to take root. And that's very much the generative AI piece.
Yeah.
And in fact, Harari wrote a wonderful piece in, I think it was The Economist, about that very thing and how terrified he is of that. The ability to communicate for algorithms is a sacred ability and shouldn't be trusted with the ability to fake it. And that is quite dangerous when we consider it in the instance of elections. And the last two elections, general elections, have been case studies of this. In the Obama election, it was very clear that there were reams of data points that led to a grassroots campaign, a successful campaign by Obama. Thereafter, it was the ability to crunch that data that resulted in insights that would lead to a competitive edge. And then we also saw the increasing ability for folks to fake that and sow the seeds of misinformation. And now I think in this election, we're going to see another manifestation of that, in which people are duped by thought patterns that have been generated by AI. So that sort of long arc of the last 15, 20 years. And I think, so I think that would be the thing to point to that's most terrifying, is that we will eventually be trusting our decisions to a deity-like algorithm or multiple. And I think that the interim steps of making sure that those things are ethical, equitable, and inclusive are increasingly important. So
yeah,
I gotta pause for a sec. Homo Deus is dense. It's a dense read for sure, but it's just full of insights, and it played a large role in crafting our thesis for funds 2 and 3 at Ascend. I think that the case could be made that the next paradigm shift from the data-centric paradigm shift to an AI-centric paradigm shift could be made, but I think that the chips are still being put down. So
yeah, it's funny. I went down a completely weird rabbit hole in researching Homo Deus. There was a CNN article recently, and this will connect. I promise you it will. But the CNN article was on the Vesuvius challenge. Are you aware of the Vesuvius challenge?
I'm not. I'm excited to
So
hear about it.
basically, in 79 AD in Italy, there was this volcanic eruption, and the Herculaneum scrolls were basically just scorched, and they're extremely fragile. If you try and unroll them, they'll just crumble, fall apart. And they contain the writings of this philosopher of the day called Philodemus or Philodemus. I know I'm mispronouncing lots of things in this episode, so that's fine. But a few computer scientists basically put a challenge out. $750,000, I believe, was going to go to the winner that could basically decode the first several paragraphs of the scroll without unraveling it.
It's
So
wild.
just recently, a group of 3 folks, actually a computer science student at the University of Nebraska, go Huskers, go Midwest, Luke Ferrator, and then Yusuf Nader, who is a biorobotics graduate from Free University in Berlin, and then Julian Schillinger, who's a robotics student in Zurich. They all got together and they used advanced AI, computer vision, all these things to not only decode the first paragraph, but actually 2,000 characters of the scroll without even opening it.
Mind-bending. Yeah, it's
Mind-bending.
totally mind-bending.
And so you think about these advanced algorithms and what they might be used for in future and what they might uncover about our future, but what they might uncover about our past. Now, what was even more mind-bending and what kind of combines with our last conversation was that Philodemus was talking about pleasure and writing on the concept of pleasure. And the first words were, as too, in the case of food, we do not right away believe things that are scarce to be absolutely more pleasant than those which are abundant. And it's this concept around scarcity of a good makes it more pleasurable. And we talk about the human condition of wanting to search for more pleasure, more happiness in 2024. I don't know how far we've come. The vehicle has changed, clearly, and the tools have changed, but we're still in the
Amazing.
same pursuit.
Isn't that amazing? Oh my gosh.
And it kind of blew my mind, but I started thinking about AI, just the juxtaposition that just exists on an everyday basis about what AI can bring and all the fruit that it can bear, but then all of the destruction and divisiveness that it can sow. And you start to go like, where the fuck are we right now? What is
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. I think that's only going to get worse. The gauntlet has been thrown down with generative AI, and our uptake of it has been so rapid that it's going to change everything. And I haven't figured out just where that leads. I think that's a good example of Bree, how you described before, this sort of just juxtaposition principle of piecing together different signals in the noise and figuring out where they point to. I haven't figured out that point that we're heading to, but I think that, we're in the early days of the internet where nobody knew that it basically meant that all information was going to be available everywhere, including people's sucky Instagram pictures or opinions. And those have incredible ramifications. And so now I think that the thinking is going to be widespread now. The ability for algorithms to think as opposed to just data to be available is important. So who knows where that leads, but I'm still trying to figure it out.
Let me ask a question, and I don't want to dwell on it too much because we can. It's one of those ones, but are we too late to establish the guardrails for AI? Or can we still establish those guardrails?
I don't think so. I think that there are multiple types of minds that we can create when it comes to artificial intelligence. What we have created in generative AI is the ability for a very smart mind to summarize widespread knowledge. There are other possible forms, and the one that I think that will emerge soon enough is a hive mind. the sort of Ender's Game
Sure.
type mind, or even a beehive or a nest of ants, right? There's a central AI that thinks on behalf of all the players or is informed by the thoughts of all those players. And I think that the ability for a super intelligent mind to have a competitor is going to be important. And I think that those different manifestations of minds will start to emerge. And that's just one type. There are different types as well. They're already working on artificial intelligences that can create technology and algorithms that we would never dream of, right? And that's another type of mind. And so there are different types, and I think that some of those manifestations, even a hive mind, would be one way to provide those guardrails. I think that the jury's still out on whether we can, without the creation of other technologies like that, compete with a massive superintelligence. In order to do so, it's fairly simple. You would need to stipulate that any AI has to have a human in the loop in order to prevent these different scenarios that can precipitate.
Sure.
So before generative AI came out, I was really excited about the blockchain, which creates this transparency ledger, the metaverse, and we're starting to use VR more, creating this new digital space. And now we have generative AI. Do you think that there's some place where they're all fusing together?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. An example that's fun is that growing up with video games, you always encounter these non-player characters, NPC, that are very limited in their interaction. We're invested in a couple of companies that can optimize that interaction, both in scripts and also in the emotional intelligence of that agent. As you think about the metaverse and encountering on characters, you can start to see a world where you interact with bots who are just as interesting and intelligent as a human. And we're certainly not there yet, because if it's any evidence that how many times a day we find ourselves yelling at Siri, those intelligences are widespread, but they're not there yet on emotional levels. I think there are some interesting and fun outcomes in that realm. I think it's important for blockchain to be incorporated in that world, because being able to walk from different metaverses with your own items is very important. And the way that you do that is with an immutable ledger. It enables some other really fascinating capabilities as well. So I don't think that I don't think the blockchain is dead by any reason. I am not convinced yet that the metaverse is where it needs to be for widespread adoption, but in the future, potentially.
I'm curious to see if Apple's venture, because you know that you have a lot of really, really huge fanboys of Apple, and it's any product they put out, they're going to buy. So I've been using Oculus for a couple years now, and I really like utilizing VR, and it's just not getting widespread adoption, which is crazy to me.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, maybe it will take Apple for people to actually start using it.
Well, they're not driving the price point down.
They sure aren't, but people will apparently pay anything for an Apple product.
So Dan, are you one of those people? Are you going to buy the Vision Pro with it?
He's
I
like,
hesitate to call myself out. This iPhone thing's never going to take off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I don't think that this is the next iteration that's going to take over the smartphone. I think that putting something on your face limits your ability to interact with the outside world, and then you can't just walk around with that on your face, right? Or on your top of your head if you're not looking through it. So I think that we all spend a good amount of time in the world, and the time that we spend on our computers or devices is increasing. So I think that as a potential addition to the devices we interact with as a computer, the Apple goggles are potentially a competitor to that. And I don't think they're yet trying to supplant Meta or different metaverses that are out there. They've taken up this stance of this is a computing device. So far, I think that I think it does come with that asterisk that in the future they may make a play for that, and probably are. But I don't think that it's the replacement for the iPhone. I think that the replacement for the iPhone is a neurological device. I've already seen demo videos that are equally as mind-bending.
You're thinking implants, or are you thinking?
No, I think a wearable.
Like the humane pin?
No, I think that's even voice. You interact with voice there. And I've seen demos of devices where it's a bracelet and a cap. Um, and you interact with your phone with the cap on and the bracelet on. It records the signals coming from your brain through your wrist as you interact with your phone. And then the next iteration of that demo is they take the cap away, and just based on the signals going through your wrist, they can transmit those signals to the phone. And then they take the phone away, and you can interact with your phone with it sitting in your pocket. And that kind of interface, I think, is more seamless a transition than a thing on your face.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you bring this up because honestly, to me, it's about use cases. I think the reason why Vision Pro and Oculus aren't it to me is because they haven't really clearly defined the use cases and the value add in those use cases. I think the cell phone was so absolutely fucking mind-blowing because it was like, hey, we're going to take this thing that you already carry around with you and then give it so much more value for you in your day-to-day life that you are going to be like, it will own you, not the other way around. It's going to be so important to you.
Having a heavy device right here that gives you headaches is it's friction.
And
Interesting. I was wondering if you were going to come down on that side of that argument, Bree.
It is friction, and it is some of the reasons that I don't use it as much because there are definitely restrictions, and my use cases are limited. I wouldn't say that there's any use case I use it for that is revenue generating.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, we talk about this all the time, and I think that this is very fundamental to my investment approach, but I never look at a technology as the key focus of my investment thesis. I never look at one industry as the investment of my, my key to an investment. It's really about understanding what problems are you solving for, and then are you really differentiated? Are you providing more value? Are you better, faster, easier, cheaper? By the way, hat tip to Dr. Lynn Phillips, my mentor and friend, for teaching me all this. But it's about that. It's about solving problems. And look, I'm not one to bet against Apple with Steve Jobs or without, but I still don't think that they've really fully baked the use case of these things. And right now it's great, and the price point prices out a lot of people. But to Bree's point, you've got a lot of Apple fanboys and girls out there that are saying, we'll take everything and we'll utilize it. But it doesn't mean that they have product market fit. That doesn't mean that you're solving a problem. And I think all of this is just completely lost in that. My theory, ChatGPT and generative AI, it was created in the same mold as Apple Vision, but they stumbled into product market fit. They stumbled into value add in all of these use cases. People started utilizing it, and they started iterating very quickly on it to catch up to how people were utilizing it.
I will say this though, like I did not understand ChatGPT and its use cases till I went to Upfront Summit last year and heard Alexis Ohanian tell me how he was using it. And then I was like, oh, that's how you use it. And I don't think most Americans have access. We don't have democratized access to Alexis Ohanian's, how he's using ChatGPT. I was just given a very, once I learned, I started doing it at the conference and I was like, holy shit, I was asking it stupid questions that it could never answer. But once I learned what it actually does, now it's changed my life. So most people I know though haven't figured it out. And I still think you're exactly right. We're like totally going off on this Apple Vision thing, but I think it's interesting because they're putting out a headset. I'm using one. No one uses headsets. Is Apple going to change it? And to your guys' point, if they don't have a use case and they don't have product market fit, then no, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic example. What I was alluding to with the different type of minds is similar to the allegory that they make in Ex Machina, that what the internet enabled is to find out what people are thinking. And what ChatGPT and generative AI will enable is how people are thinking, and that's gonna change a lot. And I think that's a good example of thinking about how Alexis Ohanian thinks and how we could all benefit from that. is one of those use cases, and we'll see how those manifest. I don't think I have that crystal ball to that visibility to see how exactly that's going to play out, but I think that in 10 years is going to become clear, and there are going to be fortunes minted for folks who create those iterations and invest in them individually.
Let's ask ourselves, what was Dan Connor for just a few moments here? What were you thinking when you decided to go surfing in a hurricane? And then, by the way, to our audience, he's mentioned other scenarios to us. There was snowboarding, double black diamonds with no ski goggles on and zero visibility. You've done other dumb things. Are you an adrenaline junkie? Like,
I don't think so. I've done a lot of things you could characterize as in that column. But I have this friend who just, every time I hang out with him, we just find ourselves in these crazy situations. And I think that he just lives his life that way. And when I'm with that kind of person, I just find myself in that situation and miraculously haven't gotten hurt yet. So I grew up skiing in Oregon on the same mountain for years in, years out. And the first day that I brought this guy to that mountain, we were hiking to places I've never been before, dropping into like these untouched barrels, bowls between these pinnacles, and like it was nothing. And I don't know how he does it, but we just find ourselves in these places. That was the same person who I was snowboarding with no visibility in Breckenridge. And it just didn't seem crazy when I'm with him.
Is he the person to go first down the path and then you just go?
He is. He absolutely is.
And then you just go?
Yeah. I think that he recognizes my ability to handle those kind of things, my capability level to be higher than my own and higher than something I would push myself into. And I think if I was hanging out with him regularly, I would probably have my picture in as many magazines as he's had. He's surfing giant waves in Jaws Beach in Maui, pulled by a jet ski, and like it's nothing. He's that type of person. And the reason we would surf in hurricanes in Fort Lauderdale is because, look, the waves aren't great in Fort Lauderdale, and they're not great until a hurricane pulls in. And so you have to go when everybody else is evacuating. Yeah, so you'll be in these situations where the wind is blowing up the beach 30 knots plus sustained, and you'll have to paddle constantly just to stay in the same spot. And then when you try to catch a wave, if you catch it or not, you'll be 100 yards down the beach. So you have to either get out and walk back to that same spot or paddle your ass back to that spot. Yeah, it's just this one or two friends who just do these things regularly. And whenever I hang out with them, we find ourselves in those spots. And this past weekend was no exception.
This is all a metaphor for being a founder. You're going to go down mountains and not see anything and just have to follow some dude. You're going to go on a hurricane and end up 100 yards that way and have to walk your ass back.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor for something, Bree. I don't know if it's founders. I have a question. If Molly listens to this podcast, is she going to rue does she look at what you do with this friend and say, seriously, babe, can we cut that out? You've got 2 kids, and
not at all. I think that our capability level exceeds the capacity for risk. And so that is the underlying factor. If I was going to go and try like squirrel shooting with no experience doing that, no time in a wind tunnel, nothing like that, that would be ridiculous, right? Capability doesn't exceed the risk. But when it comes to different situations, I've been in water. I'll put it this way. I think it was Jack Kerouac who said, "He who was born to hang need not fear the water." And it's that kind of thing. I was a swimmer. Never think I'm going to die in the water. I think the different risks have it out for me other than those.
Look, I'm no expert on this, but I feel like you might be an adrenaline junkie. I'm glad that we've pinpointed the crossover line. It's like getting into a squirrel suit and bombing through a canyon.
I tell you what,
that's good.
Every time I look at a parking garage, I think to myself, I would love to ride down that on a skateboard every single time. And my wife knows that very well. So
All right, we're gonna placate the maybe more peaceful, calmer, quieter side of Dan. I think there's something to be said about gardening, and you love gardening. With that, we've come to a segment that we like to call VC unboxing.
Okay.
For our
Um,
listeners that are not watching our YouTube video, Dan is unboxing right now a large box that Vic took over to him, which usually I do. This was fun though to have Vic,
Very
the
clever.
delivery
Props.
guy.
I was the delivery person this time. I really tried to take pride in what we did. I also, Bree, I don't know if you noticed this, but he's opening a box, not a bag. It's
That's
called
true.
VC unboxing. So from now on, we're using boxes. Okay.
That's okay.
All right.
The
Yeah, I'm
bag
begging
choice.
somebody is. Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
lot of stuff in there for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is awesome.
He's got a
Oh,
seating
this is very
square
clever.
there. Bree, you're gonna have to, because I actually don't know what half those things do. Not that I'm not a
Well,
green
Got
thumb,
some,
but
got some weapons. Of
my
some
dad
kind.
actually has a green thumb. He has a, well, we got you a specific brand. It should be Martha Stewart because we know you're a Martha Stewart fan. So we decided to have a crossover of
Oh my
your
gosh.
favorite
I'm a
homemaker.
closeted Martha Stewart fan. So you just outed me. These are
not in the
fascinating.
closet anymore. Exactly.
Thank you so much, guys.
We'd love to
Very
hear more
exciting.
about your gardening hobby and what that means to you.
I just love diversity. I love the diversity of produce out there. And I think that probably came from growing up abroad. I think you have access to so many different varieties of produce. I think you'll never see elsewhere. We used to have a rambutan tree in our backyard in Brunei, and it was hanging out over the pool. So you could climb up and pull rambutan branches off, which is kind of like a lychee, except it looks like it's covered in alien fur. And then sit in the pool and just tear these things open and eat them. The produce that we get in most grocery stores is ample. You could fill every recipe if you want, but there's so much more diversity out there, and people take it to extreme levels. So peppers and tomatoes, there are some. I think the best evidence of that is the wild names that people come up with for those pieces of produce, like Darth Vader tomatoes and all the maniacal names for hot peppers. And your ability to access those things is only limited by your ability to plant them in some places. And so I started to buy seeds for crazy varieties of tomatoes and kale. We eat a lot of kale. So just planting those things and battling pests and weeds and things led to a whole path of trying to grow some really fun stuff. And I think probably the best success I've ever had is shishito peppers. The shishito peppers
Nice.
cultivate in more number than the actual leaves on the plant, which is insane to think about. But yeah, in Missouri, they do really well. Yeah, we always have shishito peppers. I'm about to plant Japanese purple sweet potatoes because it seems like the ground might be heating up again. But yeah, it's constant battle with pests. So I got to figure that out too.
Interesting. So when did you start getting into gardening?
I got domesticated after marriage. And no, I think when I lived in any seed and watch it grow, it's amazing. You see this type of climate zones where just any seed grows if you just drop it. There are places in Portland, Oregon like that. There are places in Jamaica
Really?
like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and St. Louis is not like that, but seeing those places makes you realize how fun it is to grow some stuff. And the categorical opposite to what the conversations probably were about when supermarkets came out. It's so exciting when you pull off your first tomato and bring it inside to your family. It's like, look what I grew with my own hands. And all I did was like put it in dirt and add water. Like when they first came out with supermarkets, somebody probably came home and was like, look what they just had this sitting on the shelf. I didn't have to put any water on it at all. And I think that moment is so exciting that you start to get a little wild about it.
Do you find that there's a lot of parallel between being a VC and growing your own food and planting seeds and waiting for something to grow. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah, I think that the cultivation of it and waiting for things to actually turn up and the constant motion, even though it's a slow plodding progress, is something that's very rewarding. In our line of business, every day you could wake up and find something new in your inbox that just is, makes that day the best day ever. Wake up one day and someone has written you overnight that says, hey, sign this, we're going to send you an $80 million check. That's kind of similar to like planting a seed, and over time, you see this sort of plodding progress, and then one day it's like a beautiful pineapple. That thing off and bring it inside. Like, it's that kind of thing. That you lose the progress for its daily or hourly movement, but eventually you come to this place that's wow, that's kind of amazing that just happened.
I'm going to continue the metaphor even a little bit further, because a good mutual friend of ours says that you're an amazing cook, which is only crazier if you know how good of a cook she is.
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
now that she says this, number one, I'm surprised that you haven't had me over at your house. And not just me, Laura can come too. But I think there's also this element of respecting what you grow and honoring the elements that you cook with. And similarly, I think you and Yinka, who I'd like to talk a little bit about in just a bit, but I think you and Yinka have come up with some set of principles that guide the way that you work with your portfolio companies. And I wondered if you just walk us through that in your way of honoring sort of the ingredients that Bree alludes to of these founders. How do you work with these founders? Because I think look, we're approximately the same age, and he's 3 years younger than me, everybody, but that's okay. But you've got something. I see it, but it'd be great for the younger emerging managers that are out there that are establishing sort of a code of how to work with founders. What's your code, and how did you establish it?
Yeah, I'm going to break from the metaphor of plants for this because it's so important. And it all boils down to just don't be a dick. Every time that we train up a new intern or somebody, I write that on the top of the board, and that this is how we treat our founders. And there are so many different ways. It sounds so basic, but it's unfortunately it doesn't pass for the standard in venture capital. Everybody has a story about getting hit on by a partner at a venture firm during a pitch, or no shows, ghosting, and that to me just doesn't pass for professional behavior. Yeah. And that first step, just acting like a professional, has gotten me so many accolades that it's mind-boggling. It's so basic. Just be a professional. And that's the underlying principle. And everything else is more strategic decision. We spend a lot of time and resources to help our companies to succeed. Everybody says that, but not everybody actually does it, because the rule of thumb in venture capital is every fund you make at least 30 investments. Some funds will have hundreds, literally hundreds, and it's very hard to help every single one of them, to maintain a relationship with that many people. Yeah. And so we intentionally limit the number of portfolio companies in each fund to 10 companies so that we can intentionally help each one with a meaningful amount of time. Mm-hmm. Because pre-seed and seed, it's all hands on deck. Everybody needs to help a company. Everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction for a company to succeed. Yeah. And that the different forms that takes isn't limited to just guidance and trying to help hire people in the network. It is being a shoulder to lean on when fundraising isn't going well, a pat on the back when they've done an amazing thing and they don't realize it. It's cultivating new customers with creativity from outside of the perspective outside the reads. So, for example, one of our portfolio companies let me describe it one more step until we get into that. And the reason that is strategic is because when it comes time for our winners to raise a round that's $100 million at $1 billion valuation, our check size starts to diminish in proportion to that round. And we need to be able to say to that founder, we'd love to double down, or we'd love to increase our pro rata. And to date, we haven't lost that opportunity. because of that help that we've provided, that closeness that we've built with each and
Yeah.
every founder.
Yeah.
And that's a direct return driver. And some of those subsequent investments that we've made have been seen in the amount of value that they've raised for us. And it just boils down to that limited amount of effort from outside the company that people need. It's a psychological taxing venture that is founding a company and building it up, and it's lonely. And having somebody that you can lean on for help, even to ask dumb questions, is so important. Yeah, and the way one of the forms that takes that we're really proud of is tchotchkes. So swag, we take that very seriously, and we don't just send out pens with brands on them. I don't think that anyone's ever called the number on this that's printed on a golf tee.
Yeah.
So that seems like not the right fit. So I do a lot of thinking about what is the right swag for each company. Examples are actually surprising. And in fact, there's an an article in Entrepreneur Magazine that's coming out about this, our practices in tchotchkes. And an example is one of our companies is a insights AI engine for scripts, movies, TV scripts, even book manuscripts. And using an AI engine that's trained on reams of books, stacks of manuscripts, you can start to predict the ROI of those stories and in fact optimize the interactions or the insights within those stories. And one of the tchotchkes that we dreamed up for that company is thinking about, okay, what's the story that they want told about that company? Like if somebody walked by an object, let's say it's the Martha Stewart hand trowel. If it's sitting on my desk, which is a pretty random object to have in your desk, someone's going to comment on it. And if at that moment, that's your trigger, that's the moment that you want your story to be told.
Yeah.
And if you can drive what story that is with the object itself, then you can start a pretty successful customer journey.
Yeah.
And so we thought about it a long time and we came up with this thing. So we would send out these wooden model kits of the Back to the Future DeLorean.
Yeah.
And a package that's about this thin. It just looks like a package of documents. And nobody at video game developer offices or anybody anymore gets mail. And so when that package is walking its way through the office and that person's, oh, that's for me? That's weird. And they open it up and they pull it out and it's like, what the hell is this? And everybody's watching. What is that? Like, who'd you get that from? And if it's the right object, then that can start this journey. And so that journey for that person is, I'm going to put this thing together. It's really cool. I'm going to put it on my desk. And then the next time someone comes by and it's like, why do you have a DeLorean on your desk? Like, oh, this company sent this to me. They have this insights engine that can breathe life into a script. And that's exactly how you breathe life into the DeLorean, or even like a stack of that kit would be a stack of matchsticks if you didn't have the right insights. Yeah. And so thinking about that story and what that tchotchke is that you send to somebody can be actually really meaningful as opposed to just sending a box of t-shirts. And that's the kind of thought pattern that we've gone through with a number of our portfolio companies. Yeah. And it takes the understanding of what that customer journey is and what that unboxing process looks like and what's the trigger of those potential customers and who those customers are, and then driving that story. And so that thought process is involved. It takes real effort and personnel. And so that's how much we care about that, because if you can, as we've done, use those tchotchkes to make meaningful customer introductions to the leading international bank, the gaming company with the top 2 titles in the top 5 globally, then you can really start to change the success trajectories of those companies. Yeah. And they will never forget that. So that's why we do it. It's so aligned for us to not be dicks to our portfolio companies.
I'm smiling so hard. Sorry, Bree. It's funny because we've done 29 of these episodes. And for our audience out there, we've actually succeeded, I think, in having 29 VCs that are not dicks on this show. Like, I think we actively seek out the ones that are not dicks. And interestingly, something that is a common thread amongst all of our guests is that they place a similar importance on the customer journey. and how they even play a role in the customer journey of their portfolio companies' customers. And I really just hope for all the listeners out there, wherever you're at in your journey as a VC or a founder, that you come to realize that the norm isn't the best. That there are some exceptional venture capitalists that are out there that are insanely focused on your customer journey, on the portfolio company's customers' journey. I really think it's sad that that's how low the bar is in a lot of ways. In other ways, it's great because we can differentiate ourselves so very easily, you know.
I actually want to use this as an opportunity to kind of transition to St. Louis's ecosystem. And the reason this is like a perfect transition is because I think Vik comes from Silicon Valley. So he grew up where I am now. I came from LA, so I saw a totally different market. You guys are now in St. Louis. We've all seen, I think, several different markets, and we've seen how different markets could treat founders in different ways. So I'm really curious more about your experience in St. Louis with founders, because I know in St. Louis and in some of these other outlying areas, you guys require so much more in terms of traction and go to market than San Francisco. You guys aren't writing checks for some guy with an idea. You're actually writing checks for product. So I'd love to hear more about the culture in St. Louis around investing and really start digging in there because I'm so curious.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had that kind of checkbook. If I did, maybe I'd be a different person altogether. No, I think that I have a chip on my shoulder, being in St. Louis, a St. Louis-based firm, and we have to prove ourselves, plain and simple. And the region itself has a reputation for being focused on a different type of venture capital practice that leads to a different type of successful outcome.
Yeah.
I think that in Silicon Valley, you would be happy if you had a portfolio of 29 companies that blow up on the launch pad and one company that goes 100x. And here it seems like in the Midwest, it seems like there's a focus on companies that would that you wouldn't be happy with that portfolio. You would be more happy with a company of 30 companies that are doubles and triples. Yeah. And I don't think that the hit rate of companies hitting doubles and triples is high enough to populate a portfolio like that. So I don't think the math works out. So I think that, you know, it all boils down to it's a unicorn hunting, and it's really hard. So yeah, so proving ourselves in that way is incredibly important to me, at least.
Yeah. I feel like so there's the mentality of the St. Louis founder, and then there's the mentality of sort of an emerging manager kind of planting the flag in St. Louis. And to Bree's point, I've shared a little bit of why I've planted my flag in St. Louis, I think, in previous episodes, Bree, but I'm curious to say, okay, look, I get it. Your family's from here, but you've also proved to be a globetrotter and you've lived everywhere. So you had opportunities. You chose St. Louis. You were very intentional about choosing St. Louis to start Ascend Venture Capital Fund 1. And you are creating a legacy of fund now with your partner, Yinka. And I guess my question is, do you feel like there is going to be a rising tide at some point that is going to increase kind of foundational understanding and knowledge of founders that are coming out of the area, that are building in the area, that is going to uplift the region generally and increase deal flow in a positive way? And do you think that this region can be supportive of that?
Yeah,
you
I think
clearly have hope because you planted the flag, but
yeah, I think that the way that I would characterize it is that a place like San Francisco, the Valley, is on chapter 19, right? They are much further into the generational success of founders. And I'm not talking about like legacies. I'm talking about founders who go on to start a company that grows and then exits, and then everybody goes off to create their own ventures, and or venture capital companies that invest in those subsequent companies and so on, and that compounds. And that has compounded many times in the Valley. In St. Louis, we're on chapter 2. Chapter 1 is the real trailblazers who start companies that end up going gangbusters. And we've seen a few of them emerge recently, a couple of unicorns in town here. And then those companies exit and they get some news, they get some recognition from the community. They generate folks with wealth and talent who then go on to start companies and invest in those and other companies. And that's what we're on now. We're on generation 2. And that it would be unfair to make that comparison to somebody else's chapter 19. And so I think that it is in motion, and we're gonna get that upswing with subsequent generations. So I think that's an inevitability. I don't think it's a fantasy at all. But we still have to be smart about it. We still have to recognize what factors contributed to those successes and how to cultivate those better. Yeah, I think that's in motion.
Yeah. The problem that I keep running into, and I think I've told you about this, is that we see other regions in the Midwest growing at maybe a sharper kind of curve, maybe due to because those, not, as you mentioned, not legacy founders, but those founders that have gone on, done well, had exits, are reinvesting into the region. And we have a number of them, and too many to list on one hand in St. Louis. And I think that's starting to happen. But we need to incentivize more of those folks, but then more of the wealthy folks in the region to now invest in innovation at a more significant clip than they're doing. And I don't know what that incentive is. I bring that up because there's something else that's bugging both of us constantly that we both kind of grapple with. And it was a big part of Maggie and I and our fundraising journey for Fund 1. And in 2018, we really focused on this concept of investing in diversity. And diversity to us wasn't just about black, white. It wasn't just about male, female. There was geographic diversity, age diversity, educational diversity. But we really tried to key in on a couple of things. Number one was this concept that investing in diverse founding teams, particularly, a company with at least one female founder outperformed all male teams by 63%. Businesses with a woman on the executive team are 64% more likely to have significantly higher valuations at Series A. Companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective industry medians. These are metrics and stats that we tried to just put at the forefront of our fundraise, to say to LPs, institutional or otherwise, this is the case for investing in diversity. And all the while, since 2018, not a lot has changed. In fact, over the last couple of decades, not a lot has changed.
Yeah.
And I bring this up, obviously, because I think it's something that you have an axe to grind, and I have an axe to grind on this front. But how do we course correct? How do we incentivize? Because it doesn't just come from the GPs. It comes from the LPs that then give an emerging manager duo like yourself and Yinka, or myself and Maggie in 2018, et cetera. It starts there. And so how do we course correct? And using your engineering brain and your quantamental way of thinking, give me the quantamental case for investing in minorities.
Yeah, I think it's going to come from two things. I think number one, it's going to come from FOMO. First and foremost, the community needs to see people getting rich. They're off of investments in diverse teams, and VCs who've done the same. And I think that is a very difficult thing to watch without having done it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest factor. I think the second thing is that yeah, there's this poison in the well right now that is, when I mention DEI in certain circles, you may as well be talking through shroud at that point. Nobody's going to be listening to you. I've been in those conversations and it's odd. It's really weird. And at its heart, you're talking about an economic opportunity. The metrics that you cited to bang on. The return drivers in our portfolio have been our investments in diverse teams.
Yeah.
And not because we have that mandate. How Yinka likes to put it is we're more like The Voice than American Idol. If you watch those two shows, you realize American Idol, they come out on stage. The only one I can remember from American Idol is Clay Aiken, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a football player. Anyway.
No, you're right.
Yeah, you've got it. He's American Idol.
You know, everybody sees
Fantasia
the person.
Marino. Fantasia Marino was American Idol. Not to like be stuttered, but I don't know.
So
anyway, yes, sorry.
You watch the show, the star comes out, you see that person, they start to sing, they have an amazing voice. They're amazing divas. And the voice is different because they don't see the person. They could look like completely unexpected from what the type of person you would think has that voice. And that's fundamentally what's important. And we operate more like The Voice. We listen to the business idea before we seek out to learn who the founder is. We're founder blind until a certain point in our selection process. Wow. And that has led us to keep the door open to diverse teams just based on the merits of their idea alone. And I think that switch is very difficult to make because most VCs are founded on the principle of we're founder first. We think about the path of the founder as most important in generating successes in the future. Yeah. And we reject that principle. We think about the merit of the ideas alone. And those have been some of our best investments. Any multiple success founder was a first-time founder at the beginning. And you would have missed out on some very iconic opportunities if you turned a blind eye to those folks. So I think that's another piece is you have to actively reject the principle that define the business practices in prevailing wisdom. And that takes time. It takes time and intention. And if you can do that, right, if you can do that well, you can start to tap into some really exciting pieces. The third thing I'll say is there's this philosophical thought experiment on, it's called Mary the Scientist. So Mary the Scientist is the world's leading expert, fictional, in color. She knows everything there is to know about color. She studied it for her entire life. But she lives in a black and white world. Now the thought experiment is if Mary the scientist then goes outside of the black and white world into a colorized world, does she learn anything new? And I think intuitively as humans, we would all say, yes, this person would experience new things, experience what it's like to be in the world of color. And that to me is also very important as a driving principle in hiring, is that you don't know what you don't know until you see it. You solve the problems that you think you know, or that you do know, and you don't know what you don't know. And the inability for people to see beyond those blind spots is pivotal in something as experience-based as venture investing. If you're sitting with a founder who knows a different world than you do, you're probably not going to be able to recognize that world that person is trying to create an opportunity, and it could be sizable. And so that piece needs to be in place too, on the investor side of the table, the dark side, you need to have people who understand a broad spectrum of stories like that, of worlds. And that's what I'm trying to cultivate in our team, is the most widespread backgrounds of understanding so that we can know those opportunities when we see them, as opposed to just discarding them because we think it's not actually a thing. Yeah. So those three things, I think, will in turn play a role in bringing up this region.
Yeah. Is that so? That last point that you meant, having different perspective around the table, to paraphrase and not as elegantly as you just said, but is that one of the reasons why you think you and Yinka get along so well? Is because you bring very different perspectives to the table?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we both come from different educational backgrounds, regional backgrounds, and the next hire we make should be equally as backward from each of us for that intentional purpose. Right? Hiring in your own image doesn't really get you anywhere, but it's really hard not to. So that's what we're seeking to do, is to build out a team so we can incrementally be better decision makers in all facets.
Do you and Yinka have a meet cute? Like, how did that happen? How did
No, I met him when he was working with United Way. That's a fantastic organization that instills some really great practices in some really impactful organizations and agencies, and one that I'm proud to support. And hearing his story over time, how wonderful of a family man he is tremendous. As far as distance traveled, he's outstanding. He grew up in rural Nigeria, emigrated to New York by himself with his dad, and no sisters and no mother. When at age 7, his dad ended up driving taxis to keep them afloat, and Yinka ended up driving tanks for the U.S. Army.
Wow.
And emerged to go to law school in St. Louis, no less, which is additive for the region in itself. And ended up running for office in Missouri. He's not the Secretary of State in Missouri. He didn't win, but he certainly made a good run of it and learned a lot about himself and the region in so doing. Yeah, he's not an adrenaline junkie for sure. So we're just different people, and we recognize that and can still appreciate that diversity of experience.
Yeah. We are winding down. It's that time of the night. An episode. Bree and I love to play a game in a segment that we are now calling Drinks with the VC's Fidelity 5 Questions. Would you like to play this game with us?
I would love it. It sounds fabulous.
Quick fire. This is quick fire. Bree is going to start it off.
What is your go-to karaoke song?
It depends on the situation. I have a whole playlist of these songs. I think the first to mind is Witchy Woman by Cream.
Wow.
But if I was in a different situation, it would be something completely different.
Should the audience want to know, Dan has told me that he's a bluegrass fan, but so Witchy Woman is out of left field for me right now. I'm still shocked and I don't know what to do with this, but now I really need to hear his rendition of Witchy Woman.
Yeah, that stage presence of that song, it's plenty.
Okay, all right. Okay, here we go. Next question. If you could invest in any fictional startup from a movie, TV show, or book, what would it be?
And it's got to be the Oasis from Ready Player One. I'm probably going outside the time limit of this answer, but when you talk about a functioning metaverse that people can occupy, you literally are talking about an infinitude of possibilities that by definition outnumber by sheer magnitude the actual physical reality that is singular. So yeah, that's the only answer to me.
Lovely. All right, Bree.
All right. If you could do it all over again, would you rather be an investor or a builder?
I don't think I have the chops. I don't think I have the chops to be a builder. I think that I'm too widespread, and so I would have to go investor.
Yeah. Okay. This next one is going to be, I'm going to add a movie to this, but what movie best fits the future of the human race? WALL-E, where we've all degenerated into an obese state due to anti-gravity in the metaverse. Avatar, where we are dominated by this quest for resources, new worlds, walking around in avatar bodies. The Matrix, where we're all in a simulation. Or, and I just watched this movie on an airplane, The Creator, where AI has become almost its own race, and we're forced to live with the good and the bad of kind of everyone living together?
It's got to be Wally. I think that, it's got to be Wally. The way that people's experience is going and the advancement of technology means that there are going to be worlds that are experiencing our droids just operating quietly without knowing anything about what the predecessors of life were. It's a matter of time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right,
All
Bree.
right. Last question. What is the one deal you passed on that you wish you hadn't?
Oh man.
Oh no. Here we go.
Oh yeah. Oh, I saw it recently. Oh yeah. The most recent and a hurtful one is Rebellion's AI. It's a South Korean company. I had an employee who spoke Korean at the time fluently and was in contact with that firm. And we were told, when we go after our seed round, we'll give you a call. And the only VC that spoke Korean to us, we'll call you. And then next thing we know, they closed the seed round without us in it. And they just closed a $124 million raise for an AI-enabled chip in South Korea. That would have been a nice piece of the Fund 3 puzzle. But yeah, we didn't pass on it. We just let it slip. It's tough. It's tough sometimes to walk the line between obnoxious and sort of reminders like, hey, where'd that shop be talked to? You should let us put a check in.
Who led that deal? Who led the seed? Do we know?
Oh man, I don't remember.
Okay.
The most recent one was a Korean VC.
Firm.
The most recent one was a Korean speaking firm
Was a Korean
in
VC.
Korea.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't know who led the seed.
Okay. All right. That concludes our 5 questions with Dan Connor. And as a symbol of thanks for playing Fidelity 5 questions, we have one more box for you to open.
That's what this is.
Small one to the side. Please open that.
It's not so small. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Vic's got a story behind this one.
Yeah,
But for those of you listening at home, there's another box, another pair of scissors, probably the same pair.
Yeah.
I love it.
And our
It's-
guest,
Wow.
And here he goes. He's opening up the box.
Oh, this is terrific.
We've got 2
Oh my
vests.
gosh.
On the right breast of each vest is the
It's a
VC
branded
logo, and on the back, on the nape of the
Oh
vest,
my
is
God.
the new Drinks with a VC logo.
This is amazing, guys. Are you kidding me?
Yep. So
You
Bree
guys-
and I, we typically only make one vest for our folks, but in researching Ascend STL Venture Capital and getting to know you and Molly
this
over
is
the last
outstanding.
couple of weeks, and then wanting to meet Yanka, we thought we'd produce 2, and you can
What
gift
a
it
dream.
to Yanka or Molly, whoever it's gonna fit. That's the altruistic version of the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Too kind.
Yes, and
thank you guys so much.
for those that are at home, we actually got a jacket because we read that the VC vest is out and the new the jacket, the quilted jacket is in, but we liked the Cotopaxi like multicolored jacket. So
we
we are
it's fabulous.
straying from our
I love it.
vest.
I love it.
And
Wonderful.
we are forever thankful for you joining us this evening. We always have a blast with our guests, but the fact that you're the first one from St. Louis, my new kind of adopted hometown, makes it that much more special. The fact that we've only known each other for a short time, but I'm happy to call you my friend, makes it special as well. Before we have you toast us out, I just wanted to say thank you and cheers from Bree and I for being on the show.
It's my honor, guys.
We appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.
And with that, Dan, you've got 30 seconds to just talk about anything that's important to you. Say thank you to mom and dad, whatever it might be. It's your 30 seconds. And again, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, this has been such an honor. If I could proselytize anything, if I could have a billboard up in everybody's vision on their way to work, I think it would be populated with "Don't be a dick." It's just so easy, and so many people get it wrong. I don't know how it's possible, but it can lead to so much continued success, especially in a world where that's not the standard. The standard practice is not doesn't rise to the level of being above being a dick. So here's to that.
Here's to that. Don't
Here's
be a
not
dick,
being a dick.
people.
Yes.
Don't be a dick.
Thanks for cozying up and listening to another episode of Drinks with a VC. We are so grateful for our listener support. Feel free to reach out and add any of your questions to the comment section. If you have an idea for a guest or have some feedback, reach out to us on LinkedIn.
If you liked that last episode, be sure to check out our others featuring VCs from Lightspeed, Bessemer, Hannah Gray, BTV, and Norwest. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers!